Man, this is Diane Dawkins, man. And you're listening to The Scoop on OurScoop.com. You already know.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to The Scoop, the weekly podcast of OurScoop.com. I'm your host, John DiCarlo. We've got Ryan Mack, Kyle Gauss, Colin Schofield live from Birmingham. This is The Scoop After Dark. Recording this around 20 after 8 on Tuesday night. I would try a sultry voice, but I don't know. That's about all I've got. Kyle appears to be drinking a birch beer, his post 8 p.m. drink.
Yeah, it's caffeine free, so it's a post 8 p.m. drink. I will wash it down with 60 ounces of Metamucil in about an hour. So
I love birch beer. It's great. You've always loved birch beer.
I love birch beer.
I remember you drinking birch beer in 2015 at the conference championship game in Houston. Or were you drinking like a Mr.
No, that was Mr. Pibb.
Okay.
Because we were in the South. But yes, I do love birch beer.
So
it's like $13 though. The Pennsylvania Dutch have me over a barrel because they know they're the only source of birch beer.
You're gonna get a little bit of everything on The Scoop tonight. Colin, kind enough to join us from dinner. We're gonna talk to you about the Temple women's basketball team, which won its first round game earlier today in Birmingham. We'll preview the men's game. We've got some spring football talk for you. Gonna play a clip from Casey Keeler's interview, post-practice interview from earlier today, talking about the offensive line. Going to play part of my interview with former Temple offensive guard Drew Peterson, who was kind enough to talk to me about the late Tre Johnson, one of the best players to ever play at Temple, and recently passed away. And Drew and Tre were really, really close friends. If you're an Al Scoop subscriber, you're going to get access to that full interview later on this week. Really, really enjoyed my conversation with Drew, and I'm looking forward to bringing that to you guys. Also, just a reminder, and we'll talk about this later on, if you're an Al Scoop subscriber, you can get a more detailed report of today's first spring practice very early on, of course, but just a look at like who was running at times with the first team, second team offense. We got more on the quarterbacks. So a lot of great stuff to bring to you, along with some mailbag questions. The Scoop, as always, is brought to you by Greenspan and Greenspan Injury Lawyers. If you've been injured while on the road of the highway and the crash was someone else's fault, the insurance company is not going to be on your side. You need us, Temple Law grads, who will fight hard to get the compensation that you deserve. We only get paid if we win, so in Pennsylvania or New York, call us today at 215-261-7359, and you can find them on the web at greenspans-law.com. You'll hear from our friend Mike Greenspan later on with his weekly tip before we jump into the mailbag, and we will remind you that you can sign up for a 5-day trial membership for just $1 for OurScoop.com. If you decide to do an annual subscription, it includes a free year of The Athletic. So great combination of the coverage you get with us here at OurScoop.com, one-on-one interviews, recruiting information, and then all the great coverage that you get at The Athletic. So it's a very, very good deal for the annual membership. All right, let's talk some Temple women's basketball. Again, Colin Joseph Schofield, the 15th. Joining us live from Birmingham, where he is currently dining. Where are you, Colin? Let's get a free shout out here.
We are at Jim and Nick's barbecue in Birmingham. Shout out to Ray Dunn for the recommendation pregame. Excellent recommendation. Here with Sienna and Lillian, and we are having a time with our food right now. So really good recommendation from Ray.
Sienna
they have 5 locations.
Yeah, they have a bunch. Yeah,
business is booming. It's all over the South.
Sienna Conahan and Lillian Preto sort of tangentially joining us on the Scoop. Lillian's has contributed a couple of photos to OurScoop.com. Is going to be shooting for us more in the future. So, well, Colin, tell us, what you saw today. The Temple women beat Tulane 86-77 in overtime. Ryan and I were kind of checking in here and there during spring ball. Kayla Turner, 31 points. Temple will face UTSA tomorrow at 3 p.m. But let's talk about today's game first. What did you see? What did you expect from this team going in? They've been so up and down. Obviously, the league has been kind of wide open. Rice just lost, so, maybe they were due to lose, but I don't know. Things may be more wide open down there than we thought. But what did you see from today? Obviously, big game from Kayla Turner, but what allowed them to outlast Tulane in overtime earlier today?
I mean, really what I saw today, John, it was kind of what you kind of mentioned all year, the up and down stuff. It was a true up and down game from Temple in kind of all aspects. Like the first quarter was kind of like both teams couldn't shoot, couldn't really get much offense going. Temple took control in the second quarter. Really good 3-point shooting from Kayla Turner. She had 14 points in that quarter. And then you saw in the second and third quarters, Temple kind of started to dip back down, which has allowed Tulane to start to come back. And then what ultimately I think put Temple over the top against Tulane was their 3-point shooting. They haven't been known for 3-point shooting all year, but Tulane ran kind of like a 2-3-3-2 zone today a lot that Temple was able to exploit for threes. And they did a lot in the first and second, and a lot in the second quarter. And then in overtime, they got 3 3-pointers, two from Kayla Turner, who had 31 points, and one from Savannah Curry that ultimately turned the momentum in Temple's favor because Tulane scored the first 4 points of overtime. And it
Mhm.
kind of looked like it was going down the road where, okay, like they're really going to blow this because Temple led by 12 going into the fourth quarter and just kept chipping away, chipping away. There were a couple of turnovers on the inbounds in the final seconds from Temple, from Sanaya Craig, who threw two bad inbounds passes that allowed Tulane to, get steals and then get layups into free throws. It is overall it's a lack of consistency from Temple. Like they're able to pull it out, but they turn the ball over in critical moments. They were not very disciplined with the fouls. I mean, I think both teams shot more than 30 free throws in today's game. If not, both teams were close.
Yeah, 33 free throws for Temple and 32 for Tulane. You mentioned the
mm,
turnovers. Tulane turned it over 22 times and Temple turned it over 17 times.
yeah, and what it came down to, I think, is that Temple had Kayla Turner and Tulane didn't. And Kayla Turner, while she struggled in the first quarter and the fourth quarter, in the second and quarter and overtime, she looked like a player who easily was second team all conference, like she was named. And I mean, she was just she was really knocking down her threes. I think she took 26 shots. So she was getting high volume, but she made them when it mattered. And in the end, I mean, Tulane just didn't have a player of that caliber to compete. And something I want to talk about is the last two games, they split in the regular season, Temple and Tulane did. And Kayla Turner was kind of a factor in both those games. In the loss, she shot 4 for 20 from the field and fouled out. And that's the game where they lost 71-58. In the win against Tulane a couple weeks later, Kayla Turner had 27 points and really kind of played Kayla Turner basketball. So you kind of saw the good Kayla Turner today where she was making her shots and ultimately resulted in them beating Tulane.
And like a big lift from her today. Again, I'm just going off the box score. Ryan and I were down at Showed Off Field, just checking in here and there where we could, but didn't get to see the game. But 2 of 14 shooting from Tristan Taylor. She did go 10 of 10 on the line.
Mm-hmm.
Sanaya Craig, 8 of 10 from the line. 15 rebounds out of her. Wanted to ask you too about again, like they combined to play 22 minutes, but they were big in the regular season finale. Brianna Mead and Kellyanne Sedano, again, combined for 22 minutes, but two threes from Brianna Mead, one from Kellyanne Sedano. In a game like
Mm-hmm.
this, everything counted. They give you 9 points off the bench. I know that the numbers don't wow you, but we talked about the depth at the beginning of the season, then the depth dipped off, and now it seems to be spiking up a little bit. Can you tell us about how they looked today and how important they were?
I mean, they were extremely important. It was their contributions all came in the first half, and I mean, in that first half, they came in that second quarter that ultimately gave Temple that lead. Brianna Mead made a couple threes. Killian Sound came and made a three. I think KC had a steal or two. But I mean, it goes back to even the last game against FAU of the regular season. Killian Sound had career high 16 points. Brianna Mead had 11 or 12 points, and we kind of saw that continue in the first half today. And they didn't really do as much in the second half. And I think
Mhm.
that's where Tulane started to come back is Temple became so reliant on their five starters again. And we didn't see those contributions from Brandon Mead and Killian Sedano like we saw in the first half. And that's a big thing I want to see against UTSA. Temple had no bench points against UTSA in their second game against them. And they lost, like, I think 57-43. I have to be fact checked on that. But they lost ugly and they had no bench points. And we've seen what Killian Snow and Brandon Mead can do off the bench in terms of even getting out there and getting 9 points, 10 points between the two of them. Like that, like getting any contribution that would be huge. So, I mean, that first half, they were very important, especially taking some of the burden off of Kayla Turner and Tristan Taylor, who both ended up playing so many minutes.
You mentioned UTSA already. So Temple takes on UTSA, the 6th seed, which was waiting for the winner of the 7-10 game between Temple and Tulane. That game, you guys in the crew down there have a busy day tomorrow. You're covering the women at 3 p.m. and then the men at 9 p.m. You started to talk about this already. Beyond the obvious stuff, what they need to do to keep this going. I mean, I think, to try to win 5 games in 5 days is going to be tough, obviously, for both the men's team and the women's team. It would take depth. It would take picking up Kayla Turner when she's down or picking up Tristan Taylor when she's down, like what happened earlier today. What do you need to see out of them to beat UTSA tomorrow?
I mentioned it's the bench for me. The bench absolutely has to be crucial for me to beat UTSA. You're already coming in a team that has relied so heavily on starters throughout the regular season. Now their first game goes into overtime. That's 5 extra minutes of basketball. That's a little bit more tired legs from the starters. Considering how ugly Temple has lost, they scored 90 combined points against UTSA in the regular season in their 2 games, and the bench scored 9 combined points. All those came in the first game, and if Temple wants to keep this going, starting with UTSA again, it has to come down to Killian Sedano, Brianna Mead, even like Savannah Curry, I think having a little bit bigger of an impact from the starting lineup. Kind of taking the load off of the main 4 scorers so that there is a little bit extra rest there coming off an overtime game. And it's going to be if they all can play together and that can happen. Like, I think UTSA is a very beatable opponent. Temple had multiple chances in their first 2 games against UTSA to beat them, and they just ultimately couldn't get it done. And I think the way they're playing now bodes much better, especially with the bench. So, I mean, if Killian Sedano and Brandon Mead, Felicia Jacobs can keep giving some really solid minutes, like even like 10 to 12 minutes of maybe Felicia Jacobs, like 4 points and 4 rebounds. Killian Sedano hits 1 or 2 threes. Same with Brandon Mead. Like, UTSA is absolutely beatable, but they need those secondary contributions. It can't be Kayla Turner taking 26 shots again.
Final question for you before we move on to the men here. Again, we mentioned before you're covering them also down in Birmingham. You're around this team. We've talked about, just the chemistry, the ups and downs, why they're losing, why they've lost the way they've lost some of these games, why they've won and surprised us in some games. You're around them down there. How do they seem after the game? Do they kind of give you the vibe of a team that feels like they have a new lease on life now that the conference tournament has started?
They did. They did. Even despite like the tough loss and not tough loss, the tough overtime, the tough fourth quarter, like the post game press conference was Kayla Turner and Sanaya Craig. They were both happy, giggly. They were cracking jokes. Sanaya Craig, even though she turned the ball over twice in that fourth quarter, she was able to kind of laugh about it and laugh it off. And it just feels like, I mean, they were all playing together. The bench was really into it. There was energy all over the floor, especially from Sanaya Craig. She was really, really energetic today, kind of like hyping her teammates up, clapping after buckets, yelling in Tulane players' faces. It seems like a team that there is kind of some new life here where they are confident and they believe that seems like they've almost turned a corner now at the right time.
So again, the Temple women take on UTSA tomorrow in a second round game. Heard it here first. Colin Schofield thinks that UTSA is very beatable. So we will see if Diane Richardson's team can keep things going and maybe get some more help for Kayla Turner Wednesday in Birmingham. Well, speaking of basketball in Birmingham, again, Colin's down there covering Adam Fisher's Temple men's team. There are no such things as moral victories. They have a comfortable blowout win over Tulane. Kyle had the stat, most comfortable conference win in the American, in the history of their time they've been in the American. Kudos, Kyle.
I had
moment.
that, Ryan.
Yeah.
Ryan, I had that.
Ryan had a good stat, and he was happy about his stat. And then I said, Ryan, you're not going to like this, but King has spoken, and just have to learn at his feet here. But the largest margin of a conference victory since when, Kyle?
They beat Saint Bonnie in 2000 in France first year.
Yeah,
2006, 2007.
Now, Adam Fisher's team lost at Tulsa, played a mostly solid game on the road. Darian Ford had probably a look at a 26-foot three that went off the side of the rim. That would have, they'd still, even if they win that game, they'd still have to win 5 games in 5 days, but it certainly would have given them a nice jolt heading into Birmingham. They did not come back to Philadelphia They stayed on the road, so they take on the Florida Atlantic Owls Wednesday night at 9 p.m. So FAU is a team that swept Temple 79-73 and 77-73 this season. The 79-73 win was in Philly. The 77-73 win was in Boca. At one point, at least I thought, for whatever it's worth, that FAU looked like one of the most talented rosters in the league. They've had a lot of injuries, but again, Temple's men's team, like the women, are going to have to win 5 games in 5 days. Daunting task, but what are they looking at tomorrow? What are they looking at Wednesday night, 9 p.m. game? We know by now how up and down, just like the women, how up and down this team can be against Tulsa. Great game from Darian Ford. Great game from Aiden Tobias, and really solid game from Jordan Mason. And then just, Gavin Griffiths. Again, I think I wrote this Sunday, in what's been a really mercurial season for him. He's been sick. He's had the calf injury, but the pendulum swung the wrong way for him. Got virtually nothing out of him. Messiah Gilliard, rough game. How these teams, they know each other well. Kyle, I'll start with you first. What do they need to do to win against Florida Atlantic, beyond the whole cliche thing of like, I don't believe in the it's hard to beat a team 3 times. This
No.
You never know what you're going to get from this team, but
that applies to the NFL. It doesn't apply to college basketball.
Yeah, I mean, what do they need to do to win? Is it just as simple as they need more of a contribution from Gavin? Because I thought they were not terrible Sunday on defense. Again,
No,
they held them to 41% shooting, which is not anything spectacular, but that was good for what Tulsa had been doing. What do they need to do tomorrow night to win?
I mean, for me, you said it. You said it for me. I was going to talk about Gavin Griffiths. The struggles he's been through over the last 2 months now is almost directly coinciding with the slide that Temple has had. They lost 7 of 8. I think in that 6-game losing streak, Gavin failed to make a 3 in 4 of them. Shot below 40% from 3 in 5 of them. And he wasn't good against Tulsa either, shooting the ball. And I think when he's being able to shoot the ball and shoot it confidently and knocking down those 3, I think it opens up a lot on Temple's offenses. And I think it gets confidence in Darian Ford going, Aiden Tobias going, Jordan Mason going. And I just think it makes things flow so much better on offense for Temple. They can get contributions out of him like they were at the start of conference play. I think it makes taking down FAU just so much easier.
Kyle, what are your thoughts on what you need to see happen tomorrow night for Temple to come out of this game and, just as cliche as it sounds, surviving and advancing down in Birmingham?
So for the actual game against FAU, I think they did a better job against defending Josiah Parker in the second game than they did in the first game, and that needs to continue because he's somebody that just ate them alive in the first game off the bench.
And he's now in the starting lineup.
Yeah, probably because of how well he played against Temple. I think in general, though, the only chance Temple has at an NC State, UConn 5-5 performance. 2 years ago, Heisier Miller, despite everything that happened afterwards, just put the team on his back for 4 or 5 games. I think they need something like that going forward. Whether that's Aiden Tobias, whether that's Gavin Griffiths snapping out of something. I think they just, momentum's such a big thing in college basketball from an individual perspective and a team perspective. I think they just need somebody to, quite frankly, put them on the back because they didn't have that last year once Jamal Mashburn went down. Zion Stanford wasn't able to do that.
Zion Stanford no longer with the Villanova men's basketball program now. But.
Yeah, not to get derailed entirely, I'll be really curious what happens there. If you're a Seton Hall that wanted him last year, are you well, we still want you? Or is it no, now you've kind of soured there?
Because he blew a season, right? Again, not to get too far off track. I mean, he's not, unless there's some appeal process I don't know about, he's played more than 30% of his games, right?
Yeah,
So
he would have to get a waiver somehow to get this year back because, he played as recently as February 8th or something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think they need a guy, whether it's Aiden or Gavin or Darian Ford, who third team all conference, to really just kind of play the best basketball of their life, quite frankly.
Now, looking really quickly, and Ryan, I want to get over to you on this as well. So last time, Florida Atlantic wrapped up their season with an 88-70 loss to Wichita State. So they're sitting at 17-14, 9-9 in the American. Just 3 points in that game from Josiah Parker, but Cannon Carlisle goes off for 26 points. They've still got a nice roster. Guys like Xander Pintalan who can come off the bench, Maxime Logue who could give them problems with their size, but they're kind of reeling a little bit too. Again, lost by 18 to the number 2 seed in the league, a good Wichita State team. The defense looked, like I said, a little bit better against Tulsa. I mean, it had nowhere to go but up after the Rice loss last Sunday, or 2 Sundays ago, I guess we should say at this point. What do you need to see out of them, Ryan? Again, before we even get to, Kyle mentioned the two teams that were most recently able to go on a run and win 5 games in 5 days in a conference tournament. Just taking one step at a time. How do they pull this off in Birmingham tomorrow to just keep going and beat Florida Atlantic?
I need them to stay consistent for at least a full 40 minutes, which is something that has
I
been
don't know if you're
very,
getting that.
yeah, but like at least for the second half.
Hmm.
That is what you need to see from them, especially last time they played. After you played great in the first half, and they shooting kind of ducked off and that tailed off in that second half. You need to see them play as close as they can for at least a full 40 minutes. We've seen watching these games, especially for that 6 game losing streak, is as good as they can play. Once they get into that second half of action, there's always going to be a 5 or like 6 minute lull where they're not playing the best basketball, and that's on many different ways. They're only really playing 7, 8 guys. And that is just something that, especially at this point, you're going to be playing 5 games in 5 days. You're just going to have to accept. Like, that's just going to be what it is. Baba and Messiah are going to be the two main people off the bench. And then you're just going to have to figure out, well, is Ayuba Bryant going to be coming off the bench a little bit? Is this a matchup where we're going to have Mokita be able to come off? And how are they going to be? And then they're going to have to just get some key contributors off of their bench, mainly beside Gilliard. We've been able to see that he can score coming off the bench, especially even though they were losing those games. I was very impressed with him being able to come up, let a spark when Gavin Griffiths wasn't playing well, or when they had to put Darian Ford on the bench. So I just want to see stuff like that. And then going off of like what Kyle said there, your best player is going to have to like essentially just kind of put everyone on his back for them to be able to win those games. In my mind, it's going to have to be Darian Ford, honestly. At times, he just has to put his head down and be like, okay, I'm just going to score the ball, and especially do something that we've seen him do a lot this season, and especially we were able to see what Mash last year is at the end of the game. He might not be hitting those shots, but he's driving to the lane and he's drawing a foul. That is going to be important because we see a lot in these close games with Temple. They get these close games. A lot of it just comes down to free throw shooting. They miss 4 shots here, they miss 5 shots there, and those at points end up adding up. So getting to the line and being able to convert those free buckets.
So the last time these two teams played down in Boca, good game for Gavin Griffiths, 20 points. Darian Ford had 20. Aiden Tobiasen had 19, but the bench struggled. 5 bench points. Masai Gilliard only got 1 shot, a 3, and missed it. So I agree with Kyle. Like one player, even if they have 3 guys that I think that could put the team on their back. The problem is, like we said, well, maybe 4. I don't know that Jordan Mason is like a put the team on his back type of guy. There are games where he struggled, but there are games where he's been obviously extremely efficient, taking care of the ball. Sometimes he gets left alone for a 3 and he knocks it down. So they have guys that can put the team on their back. Obviously, a lift from Gavin Griffiths. If he can just go on a little bit of a heater here, it would be huge. But yeah, this might be. They're really just, again, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but they're almost going to have to just like everything's going to have to go right for these guys to keep things going. Like Mokita is going to have to give you like 5 spot minutes there. Ayuba Bryant, a few minutes here. Messiah Gilliard is not only going to have to be a good offensive rebounder, but he can't have the type of shooting day that he had on Sunday. But it's been a weird season for the conference. Are you guys at all? Final question for you before we move out of basketball and get into spring football. And I know that like the fans hearing this at home might pull their hair out when I say this because it sounds like a moral victory at best. But between blowing out Tulane and maybe Tulane has quit on their head coach for all we know. But did you see anything against Tulsa that leads you to believe, all right, maybe they're trending slightly in the right direction to win a couple of games, or do you just not trust this team at this point?
Well, I don't trust this team, but they were 1 shot away from beating probably the second best team in the conference on the run.
Yeah.
Like nothing that happened on Sunday is this is a negative towards the program. Like they just lost a game. They weren't outclassed. Like nothing embarrassing happened. They just lost a game. But no, I have no reason to trust this team until you just see if they can win 1 or 2 or 3 games in the conference tournament.
Colin, before we let you go, early impressions of the city of Birmingham
See, Birmingham, we haven't gotten to explore too much. I mean, it's our first night out, so seems nice. This place for dinner is really good. Doesn't seem too bad. Hopefully, we might have a couple more nights to do some more exploring, but yeah, it seems nice.
Colin, who was arrested in Birmingham in 1963?
Melke?
There you go. Yeah, good job.
Yeah.
Good job, Colin.
Yes, I knew that.
Colin, before I let you go, I thought of this. Ryan said he was disappointing it because he threw a couple of other names your way and you didn't know them. Do you want to tell us which two major musical figures you did not know?
Oh, God damn it, Ryan.
I'm
Well,
so
I do not remember who Ryan threw at me.
So not only do you not know, you don't know who they are, but you don't
This
even
was
remember.
days ago. I don't remember who
Wasn't
you
one of them
brought up.
Aretha
It was.
Franklin?
I threw Marvin Gaye out. I know you didn't know that one.
I know. No, I know that one. That's a
You did
lie.
you did not know Marvin Gaye, Colin.
Now
That's a
you're
lie.
making
You're just
Ryan.
lying
Now you're making me look bad. Now I don't know who to
This
trust.
is slander. This is slander.
Slander.
You do know who Marvin Gaye is, then?
Yes, I know
I
who
was
Marvin
told
Gaye
that you
is.
were not all that familiar with Aretha Franklin. Is that true?
That is true.
Wow.
I'm
That is
disappointed.
true.
Colin, I'm disappointed.
And I honestly, Ryan, I have no recollection of that conversation.
You sound like you're in a congressional hearing. Kyle, your thoughts on Colin not knowing who Aretha Franklin is?
We listen and we don't judge. I'm
Thanks,
welcoming
Kyle.
him with open arms. So I'm taking the other side. Bye,
Kyle
Colin.
is-
Thank you.
Kyle is playfully saying that he's anti-Ryan. Colin is signing off from Birmingham. Have fun covering basketball. Follow Colin's coverage down there. Follow Sienna's coverage down there. Follow Lillian's coverage down there. And we'll have more, obviously. Well, by next week, in next week's podcast, we're going to be talking about how things ended up in Birmingham for both of these teams. And who knows? Maybe they shock the world. Doubt it, but
Maybe they lose to the Shockers.
a nice way to tie that together. Good job, Kyle. Let's move on to talk about Temple's first spring football practice. Ryan and I were there for the duration of the entire practice. I was there at the press conference. You can go to owlscoop.com and listen to the entire media availability with Temple head coach Casey Keeler. So just some general observations from the presser. Casey Keeler talked a little bit more about liking the traits of this team. I think I've told this story before, but it had to be, I can't remember if it was year 2 or year 3 of Stan Drayton. And I'm talking to Matt Ioannidis at the spring game, and he looks out the field and he looked at me and said, "Is this everybody?" I said, "Yep." He's like, "Man, they look small." And I said, "Well," I was like, you guys were good. You're in the NFL. He's like, "No, this looks like a small team." I said, "Well, they're coming off some couple of bad seasons of recruiting from Rod Carey." But Casey talked earlier today about not wanting to run guys off the team, making sure guys could get their degrees. But he didn't use the word traitsy. I know that's like a more of a draft term, but it's talked about how some of the guys are looking bigger and stronger and faster along the lines of the profile that they want to see from some of the players in this program. I mentioned this at the outset of the show. If you're an Owl Scoop subscriber, you can go to the football message board where I posted some observations from today. Again, it's early. First of 15 spring practices. No depth chart is set in stone. But yeah, we did see at times today what the first team offense might look like, what the second team offense, third and fourth teams. They are utilizing the same system where they want to get players as many reps as possible. So at one end of the field, you've got your first and second teamers, third and fourth teamers, and they flip them around. You did see some situations where some guys, especially along the offensive line, were flipping around. So it was like a hybrid mix of some players and some combinations there. Again, Jackson Smolik and Johnny Shepard, Casey Keeler had no qualms today about saying that they are the two main guys competing for the starting quarterback spot. You have Brody Norman and Brady Palmer, the two high school players, the two mid-year guys that have come in. They saw some snaps today, but with the third and fourth teams, Lamar Best from St. Joe Montvale is coming in this summer, and Patrick Keller is still on the team as a walk-on. But we'll play this clip. I thought this was interesting. Talked about this a little bit on the message board, but something that was, I thought, interesting. I asked Casey Keeler about the offensive line. And, Kyle and I were talking about this just offline over the last couple of days, and this has a chance to be a chance. Again, everybody has to play well, stay healthy, and just because they had the same lineup out there doesn't mean that they can't improve. They can get much better. But the left side of that line, if Jacoby Hills, if you believe that they really have a lot of faith in him because they signed him to a multi-year deal, Casey Keeler talked about the fact that, hey, he goes out there, plays well against UMass, all of a sudden other programs are trying to tamper with him. I asked him about the offensive line, and I said the left side of the line looks pretty set. How are you seeing guys like John Stone, the Rutgers transfer? At right tackle, you've got Luke Watson now, who he said today is completely healthy. You've got Kevin Terry. You've got Ransom McDermott, the transfer from Louisville. You've got 3 guys there that could be competing at right tackle. So this might be the most quality depth. Again, it's March 10th. We will see. But the depth, the quality of player there looks a little bit better than it did certainly a couple years ago, maybe even beyond last year. So when I asked Casey Keeler about the offensive line, he pointed to a specific part of the line, and you hear him say, hey, we like Jackson Pruitt, he's a good player, but he's going to be competing. And so this is what Casey Keeler had to say about the right side of the line there. I thought this was kind of noteworthy and interesting.
When we look at the offensive line, we look at like 11 guys who are going to be competing to be, for that starting job. And so a guy like Jackson Pruitt is a good football player. He's going to be competing now. John Stone's a good football player. He's going to be pushing either that center spot or that guard spot. Kevin Terry, who we all have to remember was the starter at left tackle going into the UMass game. Now he's at right tackle, but now Luke Watson's 100% healthy, and he just looks so much different. And that's not even including some of the other guys we just brought in.
All right, so we'll see there if Jackson Pruitt ends up fending off a guy like John Stone, or if a guy like John Stone pushes someone like Grayson Maines at center. So again, 14 more spring practices to go. Thursday's practice, all of them are going to be open to the media. So Tyler Walker, Temple's offensive coordinator, is talking after Thursday's practice. Brian L. Smith, the defensive coordinator, is speaking after Saturday's practice. Again, if you are an owlscoop.com subscriber, you can check out our football message board where I posted some more detailed observations there. Again, got to spend a lot of quality time with Ryan at practice today and getting used to sunlight again and some nice weather. So probably be bitter cold next week, but a lot of good details there from the first spring ball practice. We're going to talk a lot more about this team in the mailbag in just a few minutes or so. At the outset of the show, I promised that I would play part of my interview with former Temple guard Drew Peterson. He was around the late Tre Johnson for 2 seasons. In his first season, he was redshirting, and then second season, played at guard for a couple games next to Tre, and they just remained close friends throughout the years, and really, really thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with Drew. He's a really cool guy. He's an executive now at Odyssey and has gone on to a really good IT career, really smart guy. And he talked a lot about just how special, again, Tre Johnson, 3rd-team All-American, goes on to a career in the NFL, was a Pro Bowler at one point, a very, very good offensive lineman, played some tackle at Temple, ended up playing guard in the NFL. But these 2 guys were really close. And like I said, at some point later this week, I'll have my full interview with Drew. And I really just didn't want to cut any of it out because it gave me just a lot of great details, a lot of stories, a lot of good anecdotes about Tre Johnson. But here is part of our conversation, which Drew Peterson just wanted to, it was awesome to talk to him, paying tribute to his friend, the late Tre Johnson, who passed away recently. So we'll play this clip for you guys, and then we'll move on to the mailbag after that.
Going back to when I first met him on campus, it was special because to not only have this guy as a big brother and a mentor, he was also an All-American. He was also a hell of a student. So there was so much that I could just sit and absorb and learn from him, and that, that's reflective of just who he is as a person, because he comes from great stock. Like, he's a 3rd-generation professional athlete, but his family is also doctors and lawyers and professionals of other types, So he came from this very worldly background because he just, growing up in and around New York City, you're in the world's capital. You can absorb all this stuff, culture and learning and education. And he had a family around him that really instilled a lot of that into him. And, it really carried over and manifested not only as an athlete from all the great athletes in his family, but being a great scholar with all the very scholarly and highly educated people that he had in his family.
Do you remember the first time you met him when you got to campus?
Yeah, I saw him. It was the locker room, we're getting ready to go to camp. So we used to have camp up at Ambler then. And I had heard the name. I didn't meet him on my recruiting visit. I really didn't interact with him before I got to campus. And it's funny because his roommate for 4 years at Temple was Keita Crispita. And Keita was my host on my recruiting trip. So I see Keita, and I'm like, hey, what's going on, man? He's like, I want to introduce you to Tre, and I was like, oh, man, I heard a lot about you. And, the joke started flying. It's like, hey, he looks like little Tre, doesn't he? So it was just, and he was my next door neighbor at my freshman football camp. So, there was always a closeness to see, there was always a proximity to each other at our time on campus together. So, he made an impact on me because he was very much, from one New Yorker to another, New Yorkers never want to give anybody credit. You kind of look at somebody like, oh yeah, that's cool. You never reveal your hand of what you think of somebody. And, that kind of initial interaction between him and I spoke volumes because we knew the subtext of it all. What I'm saying? It's I just knew I had found I was going to be okay, knowing I had somebody like Tre in my orbit. You know what I'm saying? And I would sit there and camp and practice, and as a freshman trying to get my strength up and everything, and trying to learn Division I ball. I had this amazing blueprint, this archetype to sit behind in the meetings and watch it practice and watch game tape of and just see how to do this, and it was just amazing to have that. And then again, from the academic side, after Tre graduated in 4 years and his 5th year of eligibility, he went on to complete his master's, and that stuck with me. That stuck with me a lot. And he taught me, he's like, look, man, he's like, use these summer school sessions, get ahead of a semester or two, just get this all done. And it showed me how to be a true scholar athlete. He got it done on the field, and he got it done in the classroom. And I wouldn't have gotten my first master's degree from Temple if I did not know the blueprint that Tre had set, and showed that was possible.
Again, wanted to say thank you to Drew Peterson. If you're an OwlScoop subscriber, you'll get access to our full interview later this week. Again, just a lot of fun stories about Tre there, just how close they were and aligned they were on music, just readers, avid readers, and takes you back to, a lot of those Temple teams struggled, but there were a lot of good players that they played with and against in the Big East. So I really appreciate the time that Drew lent me there. We're going to move along to the mailbag. Just a couple of questions to get to this week. Before we hop into the mailbag, we'll hear from our friend Mike Greenspan of Greenspan and Greenspan Injury Lawyers. As we say each week, he's the best injury lawyer you could hope to have, but wants to keep you out of trouble, wants to make sure that you don't need his services. So this week, he's talking to us about potholes. There are tons of them because of the snow, because of the bad weather. So Mike keeps the content going, man. He thinks of everything. Longtime subscriber. Appreciate his support of the Scoop. So you're going to hear Mike's weekly tip here, and that will take us into the mailbag.
Potholes. They are everywhere now that it's getting warmer. So what can you do if you're driving on a highway, you hit a pothole? Can you sue the state or the county? No, that's not the way the law works here in New York. So when you're driving, especially early in the morning or later at night when the light isn't so good, be extra careful on the roadways. You are going to encounter a pothole, and that is going to be bad news for your vehicle. Now, what can you do to help your fellow motorist out? Report the pothole. Tell the town, the county, or the city. They have websites where you can report these things. And believe it, if you make the report, the municipality will do something about it and save somebody else from having a very expensive trip to the body shop.
All right, let's hop into the mailbag here. We do have a few questions that just recently came in on Twitter. John from South Philly checks in. Thoughts on the game tomorrow night? I'm honestly not feeling great about it at all. We did talk about it earlier in the podcast, but Kyle, let me ask you. I'll throw this question your way. You are a lot of times. We haven't talked about this in a while, but you will say, I feel like it's more like a football thing, but you'll say I'm trending positive, I'm trending negative. FAU swept Temple in the regular season. You saw them bounce back and beat the brakes off of Tulane, and then you saw them play a pretty good game, albeit one that they didn't win at Tulsa. Owl Scoop After Dark on a Tuesday night. We are just a smidge over, just a smidge less than 24 hours away from that game. Are you trending negative or are you trending positive about tomorrow night's game?
Does Devin Vanderpool play?
I don't know. I mean, obviously, if he doesn't play, then you're trending a lot more positive.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't play the last game either, though.
Yeah,
they beat Temple.
sure.
But yeah, if
Good
he's
point.
not playing, I think he's a significant enough player that like you have no reason but to assume positive. I'm kind of trending negative, to be quite blunt. 9 p.m. Wednesday game against a team that swept you in the regular season does feel like a end of a season game to me.
So you're not buying it. Granted, it made me nothing because, again, they beat Tulane. They played well enough against Tulsa to beat Tulsa on a day where they got nothing out of Messiah Gilliard and they got virtually nothing out of Gavin Griffiths. Almost won that game. They're a missed 3 away from beating, like you said, a really good Tulsa team. But those 2 games just don't change your mind at all. You think they're facing immense uphill challenges.
I don't know if it's immense. I mean, FAU's kind of slumping towards the end of the year too, right? Like they're not playing their best ball. They've kind of fallen off from at one point they were 6-1 in the conference and now they're 9-9. So like they're not playing their best either. My gut just kind of tells me that like you can kind of see when the bookend of a season's coming, and it feels to me like that's right around the corner. Ryan, do you have an opinion? Positive, negative?
I'm trending negative, I fear. I just don't.
I fear.
Yeah. If people are able to get hot and they're able to like kind of like play with a semblance of what we're able to see in the beginning of conference play, but that's what we've asked for the past month essentially. I just don't really see it changing at this point, honestly. So it wouldn't shock me if they go home after just one game.
All right. Our friend Sean McGady asks us, are we a women's lacrosse school yet? Could be. Now, they did lose their first game of the season, right?
Yeah, the Rutgers.
Yeah.
So, but still having a very good season. Sean, if you're going to be leading some women's lacrosse tailgates down at the Temple Sports Complex, maybe you turn it into a women's lacrosse school. But all things considered, seriously, like, you know, again, we've talked about how they're off to a really, really good start. So tip of the cap to Bonnie Rose and her team. Our friend Glenn checks in on Twitter, again, one of our loyal listeners. If the QB this year is a home run, what is the ceiling for this team? So let's assume that they really hit on a Johnny Shepard or they really hit on Jackson Smolik. And I'll just throw out some numbers. Let's say, I don't know, let's say 3,000 yards passing for these guys and 300 or 400 rushing yards, a few rushing TDs, keeping the picks to a minimum. They get really good quarterback play from one of these guys. What is possible for the Temple football team if they hit on one of these 2 quarterbacks?
I understand the concept of the question. I feel like they need to hit on one of these 2 quarterbacks to have any chance at anything. So it's not just like if you hit on this quarterback, then all of a sudden they're 12-1 and they're going to the college football playoffs. I think they need to hit on one of them because, to be quite blunt, they hit on one last year and they went 5-7. Like, did Evan Simon have his limitations? Absolutely. But like, he still had 26 touchdowns, 2 picks, and like started every game at quarterback. Like, they hit on a guy like that. The only, I guess, wrinkle would be if you hit on one of those 2, you're probably also hitting on the dual threat aspect of it. Like maybe, like you said, 300 or 400 rushing yards. I would expect more than that if they truly like hit on one of these guys. But yeah, if they get that, then it still just comes down to like the defensive line and did they find pass rushers, and I don't know. I think with this schedule, like, you can absolutely convince me that they should go to a bowl. I don't
yeah.
know
I think
if the ceiling.
it's an absolute disappointment if they
Yeah,
don't
if they go
qualify.
5-7 again, it was a failure of a season. Like you
Yeah.
lost all the momentum and goodwill you kind of had going towards it for
You
you.
got seven home games. But I agree with you. I know that's not really the conceit of Glenn's question here, but other things do have to go right around. That's a
Right.
great point. Like, they did. I mean, if you at the beginning of the season, somebody told you you're going to get 26 passing touchdowns and just 2 picks from Evan Simon, you'd say, wow, I'll take that. I didn't know if he was capable of that. Is Jackson Small capable of that? Is Johnny Shepard capable of that? We don't know. Casey Keeler said they're going to compete. I will tell you that Jackson Smollett can move. He showed some burst today. And again, again, I get into this a little bit in the message board post. That they kept things simple. The story that's up now, they didn't show much. They didn't install much for the first practice. But Johnny Shepard's a little stockier than I thought. Bigger guy, stouter guy. Not that he looked like out of shape or anything like that, but Jackson Smollett can move. I think Jackson Smollett is the most athletic quarterback that they have. I don't want to take away now. Brody Norman can move a little bit too. Brady Palmer can move a little bit more of a pocket passer, good arm. Again, I think if those guys are starting this season, not to take anything away from them in the future, they might be starting because they either just absolutely blow the barn doors off the rest of the competition or somebody gets hurt, which you don't want, obviously. But Jackson Smollett's got some burst to him. I think Evan Simon was undersold a little bit as a rusher, but Jackson can move out there. So I think, Glenn, I get the question, if the quarterback is a home run, then they should, as Kyle said, they should at the very least be a bowl team. Maybe they win 7 or 8 games. If the secondary gets better around them, they generate more of a pass rush, then maybe things could get really crazy. So we'll see. Temple NYL, Philly, the Twitter handle there is Philly, New York, 4696. How does NIL work for a player like CJ Hines? Can we get that money back from him since he didn't play, or did we never even pay it out in the first place?
My understanding is that when he became suspended, he stopped receiving NIL.
That was, yeah, we're hearing the same thing on that. So again, Adam never talked about that on the record, but yeah,
It's not like they do like an Apple Cash like request or something. It's more just like whatever monthly payment he was supposed to get after that, he did not receive.
Yeah. Couple more mailbag questions to get to from our message board. Fig1 is the screen name here, another longtime subscriber. Appreciate the question. Which position group has the most talent/depth? Also, one breakout player on offense and one on defense. I don't, Kyle, you didn't get the chance to be there today, but you know this team, you know this roster. I'll start with you, then jump over to Ryan, and then I'll finish this out. What position group do you think has the most talent and depth on this team? Again, it's early. It's March 10th, but what's your thought on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on one of them with offensive line, but I'm going to hesitate to say that just because there's a lot of guys you're like projecting, like you haven't really done it yet, you're just assuming. Mm-hmm. I'm going to say there's a lot of talent in the wide receiver room. Mm-hmm. You return essentially your 2 starters last year in JoJo Bermudez and Colin Chase, and you added in guys like Jace Freeman, DeMonte Green, who I think are going to be able to carve out roles in this position. That position. And then they brought in a really talented freshman class, and that's a position where you can play as a freshman. So I think there's a lot of talent in the wide receiver room.
Casey had good things to say about Freeman and DeMonte Green today. Again, I know it's usually reserved for baseball, but hope springs eternal here. It's early March, but it seems very encouraged by those 2 transfer additions. Ryan, what are your thoughts on this one?
I'm also gonna go with the wide receiver room, especially just seeing them today. Like they looked good. Especially just Freeman. He had some pretty good catches. He had one like John, like he was close to us, a little like curl route, and that was a really good ball, and also a really good route ran by him. And they're went in the projected it's spring ball, so we can't really say, but like what looked like the ones versus the ones on both offense and defense. Obviously very, very early, but he looked good there. Monty Green also looked good. Bringing back Colin Chase and JoJo Bermudez was great. JoJo, obviously, he was wearing a great jersey, and like you could kind of see at times he just kind of did look limited, but it's March. Seasons don't start till August. Late August, early September. So you got time for that. I'm really excited to kind of just see how this room kind of just like meshes together and kind of just plays off each other in the second year of the system.
Yeah, I would agree with the wide receiver room. And in terms of depth, if, like I said earlier, if Jacoby Hills progresses like they expect him to, if Eric King progresses like they expect him to, again, I think Casey intentionally said, hey, Jackson Jackson Pruitt's a good football player, but he's going to have to compete. I don't think you watched games last year and said, "Oh my gosh, they are just really, just really really dipping off there at right guard." But if you get quality competition from somebody like John Stone, the South Jersey guy, the Rutgers transfer, if he helps them out there, and then you get Kevin Terry, again, was supposed to start left tackle before he got hurt, sprained MCL in August, and averted what could have been what initially looked, Ryan, you were there that day. I remember you texted me saying he was in a lot of pain and that injury was initially worse. It looked worse. They feared it would be worse than it actually was. But another year in the weight room, he's healthy. If he's your right tackle, maybe he works there. Luke Watson, Casey Keeler talked about this earlier today. He's fully healthy now. You might have a quality starter at right tackle, and you might have one or two good swing tackles there. So they potentially, like Kyle just said, they have to prove it, but they might have some good depth there on the offensive line. A couple more questions here to finish this out. Two questions from Sonny Al. Number one, I do think Temple football will take another step forward under Casey Keeler this season. What is the reason or reasons why Temple could take a step back this season? So if they take a step back this season, Ryan, it will be because fill in the blank.
They didn't have the quarterback play
Yep.
was not up to par with what they like with anything, honestly. And I will also kind of go into as well, the defensive line regressed with losing as many people as it did, and the people that they brought in maybe not. I don't want to say not playing up to playing up to like expectation, but just took a minute to just like get rolling, honestly. Just get back, just mesh. Those would be my two main things. Because we talked about it a lot. Where last year the biggest Achilles heel of that defense was at times the interior linemen of them where they could not get pressure and they could not stop the rush at times.
And the
And
secondary too.
but I think obviously that I feel the secondary I feel like was a lot of times bled into because they were not getting to the quarterback at all.
Yeah, very fair
So,
point.
but they did have issues with that. That is not even like an excuse or anything like that. But
No,
at
but
least
it's a good point, though. I mean, like
yeah.
sometimes they just had to. Again, look, there were some games, not to
Mhm.
hijack your point here, but I mean, you're right. I mean, there were. I think it's that old adage, but like if you have to cover for a tick longer, or in their case, a few ticks longer. I mean, there were a couple of games where they blatantly screwed up. The safeties didn't line up correctly against Navy. That cost them a
Yeah.
bowl game. Not the only thing that cost them a bowl game, but critical mistake there. But like you said, if they get a semblance of a better pass rush, maybe the corners and safeties aren't having to do as much work there. So no, it's a very good point.
But even then, like I trust the corners because I see even today the faith that they have in Adrian Lang and Denzel Chavis. And I know we talked about it a little bit like a couple weeks ago, like when we were talking first talk about spring ball, like what we want to see from the defense. They're running with the first team today. We're like just kind of running with the first team today. And you can see they have trust in them. Whenever they had to take Ben Oswike out or Jalen Casper out, they're the first people kind of put in. And obviously they brought in like Asalox, they brought in Nikhil Lawrence for like just like depth, and they did also look good today as well. But I do think if the season does not go up to par, I do think it would be everything starts at the front, and the defensive line is going to have to be the first people to kind of set the tone there. And then obviously the most important position is the quarterback position. If you do not have adequate play at the quarterback position, then it's very hard to play very, very well.
I agree. It sounds like the obvious answer, but the reason why they might take a step back this season, as Ryan said, I agree with them, that they don't hit on Jackson Smolik or Johnny Shepard, and you might have to throw Brady Palmer, Brody Norman, Lamar Best in there earlier than you need them to, and you maybe stunt their development, which you don't want to do. So, and on the defensive line too, if like a Jalen Joseph, or if they don't get some semblance of a pass rush, obviously they're in trouble. So question number two from Sunny Out, on a more positive note, what are you looking out for the most in spring practices and the spring game? The spring game, not to sound like a wet blanket, we say this every year. I think the spring game is just more for the fans, and if you're the coaches, you just don't want anybody to get hurt because it's a glorified exhibition. They'll show you some stuff, but again, like they'll install stuff in the spring. We're grateful not every coaching staff makes used to be the last 15 minutes of practice were open, and I don't. Yeah, I get that. I might do the same thing if I were a coach, but all 15 spring practices are going to be fully open to the media. So we'll see some stuff that they install, but preseason camp is another layer of it. But spring game, I'm just looking out for them to stay healthy for their sake. But
what am I looking out for the most in spring ball? Again, not to go back to the obvious stuff, you're looking to see how the rest of the offense responds to Jackson Smollett, to a Johnny Shepard. Not that we're not going to be watching the other guys too. How do they respond to, is there a point where Tyler Walker says, okay, Brody Norman, okay, Brady Palmer, get in there and get some second team reps? I'd be kind of mildly surprised if that doesn't happen. And then maybe, again, this is how competition grows. If they do something, it forces the two older guys in Jackson Smollett and Johnny Shepard to respond to that. So we'll be watching the quarterbacks. I'll be interested to see who that starting right tackle is. I'll be interested to see if a guy like John Stone does indeed push Jackson Pruitt. I think Jackson Pruitt has been okay. I think he's gotten better than I thought he might get. He was a Stan Drayton recruit. A lot of these guys were Stan Drayton recruits, but I think if a guy like John Stone really legitimately pushes him there, that's a good thing. If he pushes Grayson Maines, that's a really good thing there. So there aren't a whole lot of positions I'm not going to be watching out for. They're set at kicker. Carl Harden was kicking the ball really well today. I think, as we said earlier, they're really deep at receiver. Peter Clark looks sharp today. It's very, 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 very early. Ryder Cush had more than a few drops today. Didn't have a great day, but sometimes receivers just don't have great days. Sometimes tight ends don't have great days. But I'll be looking a lot at that offensive line. Ryan, maybe a position we haven't talked about as much that we could be looking out for, where they do have potentially a lot of depth and talent if it all works out for them, is at running back.
Yeah, I'm really interested in that, especially because obviously they lost their bell cow that they had last year in Jay Ducker. But we saw that Hunter Smith is back. That is big, especially a season after he was really just kind of getting back up to speed after injuring his knee. Because last year we saw spurts of it where he could go off for long runs, but you could just tell that there was sometimes just it felt like obviously that knee's gonna not drag him down a little bit. You can see that just a little impact his play a little bit. But he played well and he was really serviceable, just number two back. And especially when times that Jay Ducker may not have been great, you can put him in there in those situations. Then Kevion Mason comes out later into the year, and things that we were not expecting in fall practices or anything. We were not really expecting that. The main three that we were expecting was Hunter Smith, Jay Ducker, and Joe Questsmith. Those were three. Obviously, Joe Quest goes down with an ankle injury.
And now he's transferred and he's gone. And one practice, we talked to a couple people, a couple of Rutgers, and said, yeah, Sam Brown, maybe, he's had a knee injury. Not sure what he gives him. He looked, again, it's early. Looks like he's in really good shape. He's a bigger back, looked confident, got more than a few reps today. Again, these guys have to prove it. I know people get sick of us repeating ourselves. We've just covered spring ball now. We've covered preseason camp, but it could be another position of strength for them. You make a great point about Hunter Smith, a guy that we weren't sure if he was going to get another year of eligibility. Couple runs of 70+ yards last year. If he gets another year of college ball now, he's approaching his mid-20s. He's a veteran, a guy that they can really mix and match with. And you've got RJ Blunt looked pretty good today. Again, obviously huge for any of these true freshmen mid-year enrollees. You've got RJ Blunt, you've got Amir Morrow from New York. Again, a lot of different options there at a position where these guys, yes, they have to be confident enough in blitz pickup. You hear coaches say that all the time. If you're decent enough in blitz pickup, you might be able to get on the field sooner rather than later. And if you can, you have a chance to play as a true freshman there. But RJ Blunt, what did you see from him and Amir Morrow today when you were down there?
A lot of the times they were practicing, we were looking at the ones and twos. They were mostly practicing with the twos and with the threes and fours, which honestly I like the way that they have the split so other players are able to kind of get reps and they're not just standing on the sideline. I like the way they do that. But they looked good. And honestly, my main thing with the running backs is if it's a RJ Blunt, if it's a Sam Brown, which I think they are the two most likely candidates of it, they are going to need either a third back to kind of just set them apart, because we saw it last year where Duck was really good and then Hunter was good to begin the year, and then towards the end of the year there were times there was kind of a tail off, and then Kevion Mason came in and did good. But sometimes you just need that third guy at times to really set that offense apart. And that's not saying that we're looking to see 3 running backs go for 600 yards. each. That's not what you're saying, but just
Yeah.
the so someone can be the bell cow, someone's giving you a little bit of this, and when those two need to come out, you still are confident in the third person coming in and being able to get yards, being able to get blitz pickups, being able to catch balls out the backfield
Mhm.
at times. Because that was something that they expected that to be at like a Joe Quest Smith role, and then he gets hurt, and then we didn't get that. We didn't get that at all. So just stuff like little stuff like that. You kind of want a third guy to kind of be able to like fill in those gaps.
So appreciate you sticking with us. And you're probably listening to this on Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon, as the Temple women prepare to try to win their next game in the conference tournament, as the Temple men prepare to play their 9 p.m. game against Florida Atlantic. By next week's podcast, we're going to know how the season finished off for both the Temple men's and women's basketball teams. We'll have a lot more spring football coverage to bring your way. As we always say, really, really appreciate the mailbag questions. They help us just set the agenda for what you guys want to hear, so keep them coming. And I want to say thanks again to Drew Peterson for spending some time with me and sharing his thoughts on his very good friend Tre Johnson. Again, our thoughts and prayers continue to go out to Tre's family, and was just a hell of a football player. And if you listen to Drew talk, and you'll hear him more later on this week, again, you just hear about just the father he was, the husband he was, just how just gifted he was, a teacher, just a real gem of a human being and a football player, gone way too soon, obviously. So again, thank you to Drew for sharing as much as you did with me and giving us something to share with you here on The Scoop. So have a great day. If you are watching the Owls down in Birmingham, we hope you're having a great time. Appreciate your continued support of the pod, and we will talk to you next week.